So this is your polynomials video 1. For your notes on page 9, we'll be distributing monomials. So what does distribute mean? Remember, that's where we had the arrows connecting to the outside, and distribute means to multiply the term to every part. So whatever is on the outside of your parentheses, it's what you're going to multiply everything inside your parentheses by. So remember, if you have a variable, you want to make sure if there's nothing there, that means that you have 1. So write that in. You multiply your coefficients, which are the numbers, and then just put the variable there. So you do 5 times 1, which is 5. Bring down your variable. Keep in mind this is a positive 5. Now we're going to multiply it by a negative 3. 5 times negative 3 is negative 15, so that becomes minus 15. So we took care of everything, and everything's been multiplied out. Looking at our second example, this one's a little bit new. Sorry. Remember though, if that's a negative on the outside, if there's no number, that means you have a negative 1. So you're going to distribute that negative 1 to everything inside your parentheses. When we distribute, we're just multiplying. So we'll do negative 1 times 6. If you need to, put that in your calculator. Negative 1 times a positive 6 is negative 6. And this 4z is a positive, so you're doing negative 1 times a positive 4, which is negative 4. So that's minus 4. And bring down your letter. So it's negative 6 minus 4z. Remember, though, we want to rearrange that so that it's negative 4z minus 6. So that shouldn't be anything new. We did all that before. So now instead of distributing a single number, so remember we had a 5 and a negative 1, or a constant, we'll be distributing a monomial. So this is a term, okay? It has a variable in it. And you need to remember your root words. Mono means 1, bi means 2, tri means 3. So a trinomial would have 3 in it, 3 terms in it, sorry. A polynomial, poly means many. Poly means many. So let's look at our 3 examples that we have on the bottom. So it's taking that term that's on the outside and you're multiplying it, distributing it to everything on the inside. So looking at the first one, the easy one, you have that term on the outside, it has an x in it. You're going to distribute it to what's inside your parentheses. So the 4x, that's a monomial. 2x plus 1, that's a binomial. So if we wanted an example, we could say this is 4x. An example of a binomial would be the 2x plus 1. So 4 times 2 is 8. Now you have the x times the x. So x times x means you have 2 of them. So it's going to be an x squared. Okay, so what you do if you have your exponents, 1 plus 1 means that now you have 2 of them. And we'll get more into exponents next week. Just keep in mind now, when you have 2 of them, that means you have it squared. So then we do the 4 times the positive 1. So 4 times 1 is a positive 4, and you keep your variable, 4x. So now looking at the second one, whatever's on the outside of those parentheses, this time it's a negative b, which means that it is a negative 1b. You're going to distribute it to everything inside the parentheses. So this is a monomial. You're distributing it to a binomial. So a negative 1 times a negative 9 is a positive 9. And you're going to bring down the b. You have your negative 1 times a positive 3, which is negative 3. So that's a minus 3. And then you do the variables. B times b, when you have 2 of them, that makes it squared. B squared. Okay. So think about those for a minute, and let's look at the last one. This is the hardest one because you have your monomial on the outside, but when you draw your arrows, which you should be doing on each example, you have 3 terms inside your parentheses, which makes this a trinomial. So it's the same way. You're going to multiply the numbers and then make sure you bring down your letters. So we have 2 times 4, which gives us 8. Now, don't forget, you have an X. There's only one of them. You have an A. There's only one of them. You need to be sure they're both written. The proper way is that they're written in alphabetical order. We'll get to that in a second. So now you're going to do, remember, your symbols in front of them, your signs go with the number. So it's 2 times a -3, which is -6. So you have -6. X times x gives you x squared. Then you have the 2 times a 5, which is 10. The only variable you have with either of those is your x. So the proper way to write them is in descending order of the exponents. Okay, if you look, the highest one here is the x squared, so you could write it as -6x squared. Because the 8xa has more, it'll go before the 10x. And by more, I mean more variables. It has the x and the a. This one only has the x. So we would say plus 8, and we're going to write them in alphabetical order. A, x, and then you can bring down your plus 10x. So if you have any questions, be sure to ask. If not, you need to make sure you have your notes done on page 9 before you turn to the back and start page 10.